Hi, my name is Kevin Snyder of Snyder Law here in Irvine, California, and I'm a trust and elder law attorney with a passion for helping families, seniors, and veterans plan to protect what matters most. And today we're going to be talking about what the different types of title are that you can take title in for your home. I get asked the question a lot because it can be kind of a confusing thing, and oftentimes when people are making this decision, they're getting rushed through a process of purchasing a home. And during that process and filling out all the paperwork, they quickly are being asked, just pick one of the options. And sometimes in looking at it, it's pretty obvious which one you want. Sometimes it's not. And we end up just picking one and having to live with that choice. And there's implications and ramifications of those choices that are important for you to know. So I'd like to just chat briefly about the different options so you're aware of what they actually mean. So here in California, when you purchase property, you can purchase property as an individual, as a joint tenant with a right of survivorship, as a husband and wife with community property with a right of survivorship, or as tenants in common. Of course, you can also acquire property as a trustee of a revocable or living irrevocable trust, and corporations can also acquire property depending on the different formulations of that corporation. So, what does all that mean when you see these things? What's the difference between a joint tenancy with a right of survivorship and community property with a right of survivorship? What's the difference with tenants in common and joint tenancy? Well, let's talk about that. So as an individual, of course, it's pretty straightforward. You own the property as your own separate property. It gets a little confusing, though, potentially, if you are married holding property as an individual. Your spouse has some community property rights that might be vested in that property, even though on the deed it says that you own the property as an individual. As a joint tenant, you hold property with another person. Oftentimes a married couple will hold property as joint tenants with a right of survivorship, such that if the husband passes away, then the wife inherits and acquires the rest of the property immediately. Community property with a right of survivorship is for married partners, and same situation. The one partner passes away, a husband or wife or partner passes away, then the remaining spouse ends up inheriting the property outright. Both of those situations certainly avoid probate for the passing of the first spouse. However, the surviving spouse holds the property outright, such that if something happens to them, they die or become mentally incompetent, then that property is going to go through probate in order to figure out what's going to happen next. There's also some very important tax considerations and implications between those two ways of taking title, and that has to come in the form of capital gains taxes. With a joint tenancy with a right of survivorship, there's going to be some capital gains tax implications later on for the surviving tenant that goes and sells the property. We don't have that when we come to community property with a right of survivorship. Those capital gains implications aren't the same. There still potentially would be capital gains taxes to pay later on when the surviving spouse perhaps sells the property, but they're going to be much less than in a joint tenancy with a right of survivorship situation. And when it comes to tenants in common, they're very different from joint tenancy, because a tenant in common means that more than one person, of course, is owning a property. You can have a tenant in common situation when you have two people on a property, if you're using that language. But generally, we see tenants in common on title when we have more than two people. And that simply means that the individual owners of the property are acquiring that property for their own specific interests. They're not sharing it amongst each other in a right of survivorship situation, such that if one of them dies, then the remaining property owners automatically inherit the interest of the property owner that died. They each have their individual stake in the property. This can be good and bad. Of course, if you have your individual stake in the property, then you can do whatever you want with your interest in the property. The bad news is when one of the tenants in common passes away. What happens to that interest? It's not automatic. So that's the difference between a joint tenants and a tenants in common. And of course, you can own property as a trustee of a revocable trust or irrevocable trust. And you do that, of course, by setting up a trust first. And happy to talk to you more about that in another video. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.